have not prepared anything, just a blank page, but yeah, I can just introduce the topic. I'm actually passionate about that topic, so I'm happy to talk about it. It's an improvised session. Welcome. On collaborative governance. Yeah, so I've been very interested in the topic because of my involvement in those two organizations, We Share and the Open Team Network. Both organizations are what we call distributed collaborative organizations, DCOs. And the question is, when we are a bunch of people, maybe 20, but maybe 100, maybe 2,000, which we are all peers, there is no boss, how do we work together? How do we take the decisions that we need to take for our organization? How do we put a strategy together? How do we distribute the tokens that can enter the system? So I have no answer about that. We are discussing it a lot in both organizations, and we are experimenting something. So I can show you what we are experimenting and what are our inspiration sources. And so first of all, I have in mind 3 interesting models in collaborative governance. One is called Spiral. The Spiral network, it's a network in New Zealand of people. Most of them are freelancers, but some have like a formal company, like they have created startups within the network with some employees. And they all work together as a community, I would say, of companies. And they have developed some tools to enable their collective to take decisions together and to finance together the mutual goals that they need for their network. And they have developed especially one interesting tool which is called Lumio. Does anyone have heard about Lumio? No? So I can actually show you. We use it a lot in We Share. Anyway, so it's not only a decision tool. So I can, for example, show you one of the discussions that is open today within We Share. So we use that as a collective decision-making tool. So if someone wants to propose a topic, or for example, we use that also to decide every 3 months on the budget. And so here is a discussion of the next summit. We have a summit every 6 months where the whole community gather, and we work together. We align on what everyone has been doing in their country, and we work on the strategy for the next 6 months. So that's an example of one of the discussions about the last summit, and where do we do the next one. And so you have a lot of people who discuss, who propose some options about like where and how and when. And at some point we see that there is a proposal which is coming. So someone will make a proposal here. We create a proposal, and the whole community can stand if they agree or if they disagree. And we can, like that, collectively take a decision while working all remotely. So we don't need to be all in the same room. And of course, you could imagine to have some facilitation process also on that. And we have regular Hangouts. Also, we use Google Hangout as a meeting tool, virtual meeting tool, and we use sociocracy methods to take decisions together. Have you heard about sociocracy? Who has heard about sociocracy? Or holacracy? Okay. Okay, that's interesting. So the sociocracy principle is usually you have a circle, like when you do that in a physical room. It's actually sociocracy and holacracy. Those are 2 ways to perceive the organization as a human body with different cells, I would say, which are all permeable. So there are some molecules that go from one cell to the other and so on. So it's about thinking the organization as an organism. There is no boss in the human body. The heart is not the boss. It's one of the organs, but you can't live without. There are a lot of organs. Everything is necessary. It's an ecosystem. So it's kind of a biomimicry organization model, sociocracy and holacracy, which are based on circles, which are like cells, and each circle have a role, and they all you have a process. Like there is a process in your body, that makes the blood circulate and so on. And you have a process for all those circles to exchange information and take decisions together. So a sociocracy, using a sociocracy method in the decision-making process, we'll go through different steps. So we are all in circle. There is someone, if there is an issue or a proposal, someone will raise that proposal or that issue, and each one will have 1 minute to talk, and each one has to talk. So it's equalized because usually in a meeting you have some people who talk a lot and some people who don't talk at all. So it's a way to enable really everyone to participate in a collective intelligence process. So everyone has 1 minute to talk. And after that, there is, so if there is a proposal, there will be a reaction circle, and then there will be an objection circle, and there will be, if there is a reaction, then we'll have a process, like if someone has an objection, does anyone else has an argument, something to lever the objection, like that could answer that objection. So like that, we have a process to step by step reach a consent. So it's not a decision by consensus, it's a decision by consent. So until no one has any objection for this proposal, and then we adopt it. So that's one of the examples. Holacracy goes a little bit further than sociocracy. Holacracy make a strong difference between the people and the roles, and you have a very defined and very strict process about different type of meeting, like tactical meeting and strategic meetings, and the tactical meeting is really about the project, how they're moving forward, like the day-to-day operation and work, and the strategic meeting is more about the governance. It's more about how we work together. So there is a clear distinction, which is more and more made between working in the organization and working on the organization. So do I work, am I doing a task in the organization, or am I thinking about the process and how we work together in that organization? So yeah, so we use Lumio, and Spiral has also developed a tool called Co-Budget. So it's about the money distribution. Co-Budget. I don't know if there is something online. It's not yet like released open source, but it will be. And yeah. Oh yes, that was the. Oops. Sorry. So co-budgets in Spiral, every entity which is a member of the network agree to give back a little bit of what this entity, the money that this entity generates. So they can of course they can share whatever they want, but they are asked to share 20% of what they earn. But of course, then it's voluntary contribution. And co-budget is this global wallet that everyone contributes to, they decide together how to spend that money. So they can, and I think they have a weighting process about, like, depending on how much you have contributed to that global budget, your voice counts more or less to decide on how you use that money. And anyone can propose a project to the network to be financed by this global pot. So, for example, Lumio has been kickstarted. There was someone in the network who said, oh, I had an idea, I want to work on that. And they have decided, the collective have decided it was a good idea for the social web, for the society. And they decided to kickstart Lumio with that budget. So they work collectively, and they really have a strong mission and value. They're really a value-driven network, and they want to make good for society. So any kind of project can be found with the global pot. So yeah, that's and they are also developing some interesting tools like holodecks about how to represent the roles in an organization, like in a complex organization distributed with different geographic areas, different functions and people. Like for example, in Open Food Network, I work on the French instance, on the Norwegian instance. I work on some global tasks. So you can be based somewhere and work on a project for another. So in our world, it doesn't really make sense, the geographic where we live and so on. So we need some tools also to reduce the complexity and present it simply, to make it accessible also for more people to join, because it can be very complex to holodecks. I'm not sure about the. Yeah, that's it. have developed that tool, which is not yet also released, but that will be released open source also. Everything is that they do is open source in Explorer. So you can see here the different projects which are around, like Numio, for example, and you can see who are the people who work in Numio, and if you click on one people, you can see in what other project he works in the red networks with like a holomic presentation of the people and the project and so on. So that's one very interesting inspiration tool for Open Free Network and for WeShare. We are very inspired by what they do, and so we use Numio, for example. We are thinking about experimenting co-budget also for WeShare. Yeah, and there is the second one is Liquido. So it's the principle of liquid organizations. It's the idea is to build an organization as you build an open source software. So in an open source software, anyone can start contributing and bring some code, but it's based on contributorship. So the idea of Liquido is to build an organization like that based on contributorship. You can step in, step out. There is no interview. So Liquido is built by an organization called Cocoon Projects based in Italy. That's more or less a lot of freelance consultants who work together. And for this organization, there is no interview. If you want to start working, you just start working. You just say that you want to join the network. And right now, you are invited to the Kanbanized board where they manage the whole task list. And you can start jumping on a task. You don't have to go to any interview. You just start. And you can learn. So you can start jumping on a task and not take you will more be an observer to learn at the beginning. And they have developed, so I really encourage you to download the white paper. I think I have actually, and I can tell you one thing here. And so they have, four pillars. So they have those collaborative working boards that they use Kanbanize. I can't show you because I'm not in it, but so they list anyone who has an idea also, even if you just joined the organization, you have never done anything in that organization, you can propose a project, propose an idea, and if the community think it's good for the project, it will, from the idea column, it will go to the to-do column, and anyone can start putting his name and start to work on the task. So it's really a smooth process for anyone who wants to join. And they use a contributive accounting, which like on every card in the Kanbanize, in the Kanban, the whole people who contribute on that card, they evaluate all the time how much worth that task. So maybe it worth 2,000, 3,000 tokens. They use like a token, an internet token. And at the end of the task, so that evaluation can change during the time, because maybe they will realize it really requires more work and it's like much more bigger than that at the beginning. So this evaluation is not rigid, it can change. And when the task is finished, it's frozen, and the whole people who have contributed to the task, they have an evaluation process where they evaluate themselves about what was the percentage of their contribution in the whole task. And they evaluate the others. And they all do that. And at the end you see, and usually it's very interesting, because what I was saying is that there is not so much difference between all the evaluation, and usually between the way you evaluate yourself and the other evaluate you, there are usually not more than 10% difference. But they also present the reputation tracking. They also in a transparent way, they show the difference between your evaluation and the way the other people evaluate you, and they monitor this to also make more transparent and make visible if there are people who under-evaluate themselves or over-evaluate themselves, so that they can also adapt. And that's so it's about making visible what is informal usually and not visible. And they use also some collaborative decision making. They use the quest method, question, envisioning, selecting, and testing. So it's like an iterative process about decision making process. So that's also a very it's an inspiration. It seems to work very well, and they are building a software. They are starting to build the software to support the organizations who would like to implement this framework as a governance framework. So it's also not static, like the how we work together, the decision can always change. So it's not you start with a framework that enables you to reshape your organization permanently. Because the problem is that when you have a static, when you have a governance model, it's not agile, it's not adaptive. So it's about how do you build a process, a protocol that enables you to readapt permanently and reshape permanently your organization depending on the tensions that emerge within the organization and the everyday work. And yeah, and the last one I want to share with you, and then I will let you speak. It's called backfeed. Oops. Sorry. So backfeed is still very experimental, but it's based on the swarm intelligence theories. So it's based on Ethereum. Well, it goes very far in the field. So backfeed is, the idea is that within your community, so let's say we share or open to network, you can create your own token, so it's based on Ethereum, and you generate your own reward pool, your token, and you have a reputation and ranking, I would say, or so. For example, I start a project with another person, so both of us, we know we have the vision, we have the value, we know what we want to do. So we start this project, and some people will start to contribute to that project. So at the beginning, we have the reputation, so we have 50% reputation, each of the 2%. And if someone starts contributing with something that we think is really valuable for the project, we will evaluate positively the contribution and we will dilute then our reputation. So this third person will gain reputation in the project. And then we'll be able to evaluate other people and also make other people gain reputation. So it's about how, it's the integration process of people and how the social reputation, which is informal until now, can be more transparent also. And so they have those two parameters. One is the reward in like how many tokens worth a contribution, and the whole community can say and participate in that. And there is also the reputation that the people gain and the decision power that they gain in a dedicated circle. So just to show you one example about how they implement that, it's very, very emergent. We're the first experimenting it in Myriam. It's the very first organization that started to experiment it. So they have developed an add-on oops, I'm not going to do that, sorry. An add-on on Google Chrome, connected to Slack. And so we use Slack as a regular communication tool in WeShare. And so just the add-on they have developed, now you can add a collaborative project. And when you add, and you can submit a contribution. So here, oops, I can't, it's working, what's it working? Anyway, so you have some examples. Like someone has created this collaborative project and has submitted a contribution, and if I am connected properly, I don't know what happens, but I have a button, evaluate, and yeah, anyway. And when I evaluate, I have this screen and I can say like how much token I think that worth, and so that's very emergent, but about how we facilitate a collective intelligence process about how we take decisions together, either on the strategy or either on the money flow or the token. We're just for kickstarting the conversation. Does anyone have some ideas to share about that? Or feedback? Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting thing to throw into this kind of meeting or event, because in terms of social movements and so on, so much of our ideas of organization come out of first of all business organization, initially factory organization, and then the 20th century corporation, all of that. and then also military organization. In fact, in the early 19th, late 18th century, I think the two were kind of developing more or less hand in hand, or at least they influenced each other. And it is very interesting to see how businesses, like small businesses and freelancers and so on, can come up with ways of coordinating activity, which often have eluded social movements. You know, in social movements there has been, for as long as I can remember, a kind of endless oscillation and tension between what was famously called the tyranny of structurelessness, which is, you know, Google the tyranny of structurelessness and you will find the classic paper by, and it came out of the women's movement, yeah. And between bureaucratic or organization or top-down organization or democratic centralism. And if ways have been found in, essentially in business, to get away from these models and develop ones that are more appropriate for post-industrial environments. Yeah, I think we're onto something here.
Yeah, that's exactly what you say. It's like, it's about how to distribute power in the organization. It's not democratic centralism, it's decentralizing the democracy.
Yeah,
That's it. Definitely.
So I'm curious about how these various models handle actively malicious participants, because that's something you need to take into account when organizing something, social movements or any potential subversive movement. Really, you need to take into account.
Like the malicious. Actually, they talk a lot in Backfeed about that. Like, what is interesting in the Backfeed model is that the people who start the project, they hold the reputation. And they dilute this reputation just when people contribute in a way that reinforces the value system that was started. Because they decide, like, if someone contributes in a way which is not bringing value to the project as a whole, then they won't gain reputation and they won't gain any power, any decision power. So it's really reinforcing a value system. And the Backfeed vision is really holonic. Like, if someone in the community has an idea and the other person don't really believe in it, he can fork the organization. So you create a new holon, a new circle, and the people who think, who believe in this idea will follow them in this circle. So it's a little bit about mimicking this nature emergence movement, organic growth and fork and like. So it's Backfeed is supposed to be a system, a trustless system. You don't need to trust each other, actually. You trust the protocol. It can be a little bit frightening in some dimension, but you agree on the protocol and you trust the protocol and you don't need to trust each other. Which, for me, like, to be honest, this is something I don't really agree with. Like, I think in our community we need to learn to trust each other. So I'm not, but it's interesting. I'm not saying I'm a big fan of Backfeed, but I think the vision and the technology they bring, this protocol they are building will be released open source. And I think it can be very interesting to use for some other purpose also. I have something in mind, but yeah.
So I'm completely outside. I don't know about any of these tools and so on, but I feel a little bit skeptic because it seems like there are a lot of like quite big tools that you have to learn, and it becomes kind of a threshold for anyone to participate. And also, I think that like I feel why not just decide how the organization will work and then do the communication by email, because that's much more transparent. You have like to know what actually happens. You have to understand what the software is actually doing, and you have to basically know all of the algorithm it uses. So like, is it really worth it to have all of those, to put all the work into all of these tools that are like, you have to learn like 10 different ones and you don't really know how they work. So is it more transparent just to decide how your organization will work and then make, like, follow the decisions instead of having computer programs that follow the decisions for you?
I totally agree with you in the sense that first, the tool doesn't make the model. The tool is just a tool and has to stay a tool. It's first about how we want to work together and how we want to organize, and then see what tool best fits to support the way we want to work together. And it's true that it can be a threshold. Like for example, in WeShare, of course, if you don't use Slack and if you don't want to use Slack, it's very hard to participate. But it's also because when you are such a complex organization, you can't work with emails. It's not possible because people jump in, jump out, and you don't. So what is very interesting in Slack is that you have channel and people follow, or they can step out if they don't want to follow this anymore. And we each one have the freedom to participate to the topics we want to participate in and to participate in the discussion we want to participate in, but we don't have to. Like we're not spammed by a lot of emails also, and we choose ourselves if we want to receive a notification by email or not. And so it's finding the balance, but I agree with you, and it can be like in open food network, it's much more difficult because it's less techy. Like we shared a lot of geek people, so we are kind of happy to test and see the potential those tools brings in the way we like facilitating our communication process. It's really that the tools are facilitators of a communication process. But in open food network, it's a bit more hard because people are much less into that, so the threshold for using the tool is much higher. But still, in global distributed organizations like that, I think you have to find, you cannot do without such tools. I don't see, but I agree with you, it's limiting, but we are in that transition period also, like more and more people, they're very easy, very user-friendly. Slack and Lumio, it's very easy to understand how it works, but it's one more tool. So when, like usually we have a set of tools, we have Trello for the projects, we have Slack for the discussions, we have Lumio for the decision-making process. And that's true that it can be a little bit overwhelming also. I don't remember the second part of your question, but
I think you covered most of it. And maybe you didn't cover the part where there are actually a lot of kind of algorithms, decisions inside the tools that you might not be aware of or have control over. So you lose transparency in a way, but maybe you cover it.
Yeah, maybe in Backfeed, I mean Lumio there is no really algorithm or Slack either, but it's true that in Backfeed it's actually the community itself who writes the protocol. So there is supposed to be a time where we all like are physically around the table and decide together about what we want the process to be, and then we implement, we put that process in the algorithm, and if there is something, but of course then you have to trust that what you have put in it is really what is been done, so there is probably some work to do here, I agree with you. But then you can also reshape if there are tensions that emerge, you can also change, all the time you can change the protocol that you have. So it's really about, the most important is really the iteration process, about and being aware and having some space for the tensions to be expressed, to be raised, which we are lacking today, for example, in WeShare. So yeah, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, on a more technical note, I guess, self-hosting all these tools, or self-hosting or self-hosted alternatives to all these tools. Do you know anything about that? I know that there's Mattermost, which is sort of Slack. Mattermost. I think it's basically a self-hosted Slack, although I mean IRC server is a self-hosted Slack. So, but these other tools, do you know if there's any way of they're sort of open source so you can download and run them yourself? Or?
I think they're all open source. Like Lumio is open source. Slack is not open source. Sorry, Slack is, but we use it as a discussion, but it's free. It's not open source, it's free. And Liquido, they have no software for the moment. They just have a white paper, and they use like Trello, and they use like tools that you find everywhere. They use spreadsheets, so it's like. But Backfeed will be released open source also. But I'm not really on the tech side, so but like most of those tools are open source. So you can host them yourself if you know how to do that. Which is not my case.
What scale do these tools work? If you have 10,000 people, 100,000?
actually the idea, especially of backfeed, that's exactly the idea they have, to enable the community to scale. Because, well, Lumio, it's great, but if you have 2,000 people, it's actually not everyone participates. Because if you have 1,000 people who answer to a discussion, it's hard to follow the discussion. So it's true that like the decision making, so that's why it's important to have a kind of holomic vision, like you can have different circles of decision making and not everyone participates to all circles. So it's more about finding out who contribute to which circle of decision and how all the start circles are interconnected. But backfeed is really, the idea is really to be able to scale. It's not really, it's still very abstract. They are really in the early stage. But this is really their idea, and but it's true. I mean, I'm not sure we yet have a tool that's enabled to like this swarm intelligence. It's a vision, but it's not really yet concrete about how we can operate that. So I don't really have an answer. Maybe someone else have an answer on that. Or an idea.
I suppose it won't be very decentralized either if you have 100,000 people on a project as such.
That's it.
I'm thinking in kind of analog analogy, then it will kind of theories say it will form kind of spontaneous groups based on geographical limitations, and you don't have that there, but could you kind of impose some analogy to geographical limitation into the system to decentralize larger groups?
I think it's really about how you write the way you use those tools. Like in backfeed, it's really you can write that in the protocol. If you want. You can write whatever you want in the protocol. But then in Lumio, Lumio is just a tool again. So you can say that, for example, in Myriam, in Open Network, there is one entity in Australia, one entity in Norway, one entity in France, one in UK, and each one we have our own tool and our own governance. So maybe some of them use it, and we don't want to impose a tool. Like maybe some of them don't want to use that tool and work very well without them because it's smaller scale. So maybe they don't need that. And the Lumio discussion will be only for the global topics. So it's also, but they can use it, like maybe we can have a Lumio for the French instance and use it for the French instance, but it will be a separate organization. So it's again how it's not a tool, it's what is the process that you want to build. So it's more about the organization design, which probably is an iterative process.
We've almost used 45 minutes.
Wow.
There's still time for one more comment if anyone.
This sounds a lot like other initiatives to democratize meetings, like open space, methodology, but the people I meet who are into that are very far away from tech. So this is trying to make the same kind of change in a much larger scale and tech supportive, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's more about going beyond the borders because the non-tech need to be physically in the same area. So, but you're right, like those people, Cocoon Project, I was at the European Organization Design Forum, and they use open space technology for the local events. So all this is completely connected, as you say. It's about how to mimic those kind of systems in a platform or in the software to enable that on a remote mode.